hopefully my audio is working. I've been having some trouble, but we'll see. I had a question. Actually, I haven't had the question yet, but I've had someone say they've got questions about the graphs in chapters 14 and 15, which will be this this graph for chapter 14, and then we'll go to chapter 15 in a second. We might split up the stream just so we have two separate videos, but let me walk you through this. So from the perspective of a firm, essentially what we've got going on is the firm wants to maximize profits, and that means, in this case, deciding how much to sell. For a perfectly competitive firm, they are a price taker, right? So if I'm selling oil, right, doesn't matter really how much oil I sell, the price is going to be whatever the price is. We don't need to know what the price is. Let's call it $50 a barrel, something like that. So if I sell 1 barrel, I get $50 in revenue. If I sell 100 barrels, I get $5,000 or $5,000 in revenue. And that's what's going on with this this horizontal line. Price equals marginal revenue equals average revenue. So the price is just, it's $50 a barrel. The average revenue is, if I sell 100 barrels, I get 50 times 100, 5,000. I get 5,000 total revenue, but per barrel on average, I'm getting 5,000 divided by the 100 I'm selling is $50 a barrel, right? Nothing crazy there, right? It's extra terms, and those extra terms matter when we get to the chapter 15 stuff on monopoly, but for here, it's just average revenue is equal to the price because however much we sell, we're selling at the going price. The marginal revenue, this says if I sell one more, I get an extra $50, right? And again, for perfectly competitive firms, it's all the same thing, right? You sell one more barrel of oil. If you're just some guy with an oil well in Kansas, you pull up a barrel of oil, you sell it to the distributors, you get $50. You sell another one, you get another $50, right? So each additional one, that's what we mean by marginal, is you're getting that extra $50. Now, your decision about where to maximize profits, we're going to be focusing on this point here, right? Certainly going anywhere past that means that we're adding more to our cost than we're adding to our revenue. There is a really great story from Planet Money. If you search Planet Money buys oil, you'll find a great 5-part series about them going through the effort to actually buy a very small quantity of oil, 100 barrels, from some guy in Kansas with an oil well. And they do a really good job of illustrating exactly what's going on in that industry in particular, but it also really does a nice job of providing a story to make sense of this chapter 14 stuff. So at Qmax, right, whatever it is, if we're selling there and we decide to sell one more barrel of oil, that means, say, a little bit more maintenance on our pump, right? Or it means just a little bit more effort. And because of the law of diminishing marginal returns, it means that the cost we're getting from that barrel of oil is a little bit more than $50. But if we're only getting paid $50, it doesn't make sense to go past there. If we go to the left, we're giving up the opportunity to get $50, and it might only add $45 to our costs. If it costs us $45 to make $50, that means we're getting $5 essentially for free, right? $5 of profit on the margin. Now, that's profit on the margin. We're going to see in a second that profit itself is not quite so straightforward. Let's see. Can I mess around with this myself? Oh, actually, this isn't too bad. So normally we have a marginal cost curve that looks sort of like this. And I described this in yesterday afternoon's meeting, so go back and check that video for the explanation of why we get this shape. But really, we can even say, don't even worry about this bottom end. We're really not going to be dealing with what's going on over there, because what we're really interested in is what's going on right here. Right? We want to be at that point. Now the other part of this, so that's the marginal. The other part of this is about the average. The marginal tells us what we want to do in terms of the choice we have. If I'm selling oil out of my well in the backfield of my farm in Iowa or Kansas or wherever, my decision is how much do I make? Or do I just turn off the pump entirely, because that might make more sense if the price is really low like it is right now. So now we bring in our average cost curves. So what we expect is in equilibrium to have a curve sort of like this. There's our average total cost. So this is going to tell us, compared to our total revenue, are we making money? Now the quantity we make, there we go, here's our graph, here's our quantity, this is dollars. We're going to make this quantity where our marginal revenue hits our marginal cost, and our average revenue or our marginal revenue or our price, right? It's all the same thing in perfectly competitive markets. This is really why we do perfect competition, because we can just say price is the same as all the other things. And that'll make more sense when we look at monopoly in just a little bit. So given that this green line is telling us how much we're getting for all of the 100 barrels that we're selling, we can just say our total revenue, we'll make in green, is this whole green rectangle, right? That's our total revenue. We want to know what is our total cost. So our total revenue is just price times quantity. Since we're getting the same price for every unit we sell, 50 bucks, 50 bucks times 100 units gives us $1,000 total revenue. Let me go back to the pencil. For our cost, what we do there is we compare that to the average cost on this blue line. So in this case, the way I've drawn this, I haven't drawn it perfectly, but let's just pretend this blue line is hitting that green line, and that means my average cost at this quantity is equal to my average revenue, which means I'm making zero economic profits. I'm making just enough to cover my costs, including my opportunity cost. Right? I'm putting effort and money and resources into pumping up this oil. I could have just put that money in the bank and got a 0.5% interest. Here, I'm getting enough to account for the fact that I could have been making a 0.5% of risk-free return. I'm probably getting a little bit more than a 0.5% return on my investment in this case. So zero economic profits, that's what we expect. That's usually the equilibrium story we start with. And then we bring in something else. Something changes. So maybe the price of oil drops. So let's draw a new story. Our price falls. And given the price falling, we want to cut back just a little bit, right? Because that 100th unit cost us 50 bucks to make, but if we're only getting, say, $40 for it, it doesn't make sense to keep producing that barrel of oil. So we're getting $40. Again, price equals marginal revenue equals average revenue. And we can fill in this purple rectangle and say that is our total revenue. So our total revenue's fallen partly because the price dropped, right? We're missing out on this area up here. And we've also cut back on our output, so we're missing over here too. Now what happens to our average cost? Well, we're no longer at the point where we're minimizing our average cost. And this is a really important point. If you're operating a business, let me take two perspectives. So perspective number one, as an economist, we would like to see businesses operating where they're minimizing average cost. That's going to be best for society. That means we get our oil while wasting as few resources as possible on average, right? That's what we want to see as economists. But for the firm, they don't necessarily want to minimize average cost. Let me take an even more extreme case. How would you minimize cost, period? Well, you would not produce at all. You have costs of zero. Does Jeff Bezos want to bring Amazon's cost down to zero? No. He wants high costs because he gets even higher revenue. So what we have here is this situation where we cut back a little bit and we end up at a slightly higher average cost, right? And a part of that is if I've got this oil well in my field, I had to pay for a lot of equipment. I'm making payments on the loan I took out to buy that equipment to begin with. So I've got some fixed costs, right? And if I'm selling fewer units, those fixed costs aren't spread so thin. So I've reduced my marginal cost by cutting back from 100 to 95 or whatever, but my average cost has gone up a little bit because across 95 barrels of oil, the $1,000 a month I'm paying on this loan is not spread across 1,000 units, it's only spread across 95 units, right? So that's why the average goes up a little bit, right? And it would go up even more if we go further back. So given this average cost, now we draw this very carefully. We draw this horizontal line across. This now tells us, I'm going to undo this in just a second. There is our total costs, right? The average cost times the quantity. So if our average cost is $52 a barrel and we're selling 95 barrels, 95 times 52 is the area of this blue rectangle. So that's the total cost. Our profit, which in economics, we use the symbol pi for profit. Don't worry about that unless you're taking Eco 250 with me in the fall. This is just total revenue minus total cost. And in this case, our total revenue is small, right? 52 times 40. What did we have before? We had 5,000. This should be 20% lower, so closer to 4,000. Let's call it 3,800. I'm just going to do sloppy math here. About 3,800. Our total cost is about 52 times 95. What's 5? This would be, let's call it 4,500. Put a 5 in there. Right? So in this case, we're losing money on average. Now, this might be the best we're doing. The other question we need to ask is, when we're pulling this oil out of the ground, what's going on with our maintenance costs? And to understand that, what we need to think about is our variable costs. And we need to consider what is our average variable cost compared to the money we're bringing in. Let me try and clean this up just a little bit. That'll do. So, our average variable cost, let's start by assuming it's up here. Right? And if this is the case, what this means is our average variable cost is greater than our average revenue. I'm bringing in $40 a barrel, but each barrel I dig up costs me 45 bucks, which means I'm losing $5 for every barrel I pull up on average, which means I just don't want to be in that business at all. This is where I want to shut down. It's better to just turn off the equipment, keep making the loan payments, but don't make the maintenance payments that I would have to pay if I was actually running the equipment. Or the electricity necessary to run the pump, or whatever other variable costs might be going on, right? Any costs that I could avoid by turning off the pump, it makes sense to do that, because at that point, not only am I losing money overall, right? This average total cost is greater than my average revenue. I'm just not even covering the costs of operating in the short run. Right? So I'm stuck with the loan payments. That's a sunk cost. Pushing that aside, in the short run, my decision is ignoring the sunk costs doesn't make sense to operate. And with this average variable cost, it doesn't. Now, if we were to slide this down, now we got a different situation. Now our average variable cost is less than our average revenue. So we're bringing in $40 per barrel. This last barrel costs us about $40 to pump, but our average variable cost, our costs of running the pumps, maintaining all those things, the average cost is low enough to justify staying operational. Right? So in this case, although I'm losing money overall, let's do that in whatever. Although I'm losing money overall, right? So the difference between my average revenue and my average total cost in this blue smudgy area, I don't want to be in this position in the long run, but in the short run, I'm at least covering my variable costs, right? I'm covering the costs of operating tomorrow. So I pull up more oil, I'm in a less bad position than if I shut down. Whereas if my average variable costs are high, too high compared to my average revenue, in that case, I'm better off not digging up any oil at all, because in that case, I would be losing more money by operating. Here, I'm losing money, but I lose less by digging up some oil. I'm at least getting some revenue, and that revenue is enough to cover the costs of getting that revenue. When the average variable cost is high, we're not bringing in enough to cover the costs of operating, so we're making ourselves worse off by digging up more oil. We're still losing money, but we're losing even more if we choose to keep producing these 95 barrels. All right, I'm going to